Come, come, gather around. Get ready for a new tale on Dreamin' Kit. Before we start, please help me reach a few more subscribers. I would greatly appreciate it. Now, let's start our story for today. Chapter 1. Whispers in Stone Gibson. Everett grips his compass tightly, watching the needle spin in erratic circles, as if dancing to some unheard melody. That's the third time in an hour. He taps the device against his palm, but the needle continues its frantic rotation before settling on a direction that can't possibly be north. Sector 22G always does this. Messes with his equipment, plays tricks on his senses. The thick canopy of ancient redwoods and pines blocks most of the morning sunlight, casting the forest floor in a perpetual twilight that only adds to his unease. Gibson checks his GPS unit again. The coordinates jump wildly, placing him anywhere within a 5-mile radius, sometimes even showing him in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. "Piece of junk," he mutters, shoving the useless device back into his pack. He'll have to rely on old-school techniques today. Topographical maps, landmark identification, and his own internal compass, which has never failed him despite 7 years working for the Shasta Trinity Forest Service. The silence here is different from other parts of the wilderness, heavier somehow, as if the air itself were thicker. When Gibson snaps a twig beneath his boot, the sound echoes with unusual clarity, bouncing between trees that should absorb such noise. Yet when a raven calls from somewhere above, its harsh cry reaches him muffled and distant, though the bird can't be more than 50 feet away. Gibson pauses in a small clearing to consult his map, orienting himself by the position of Three Sisters Peak, visible through a gap in the canopy. According to the survey schedule, he needs to document this area for potential timber salvage following last season's controlled burns. Standard procedure: photograph the terrain, mark GPS coordinates of significant features, note any environmental concerns or archaeological points of interest. Except nothing about Sector 22G has ever felt standard. The fine hairs on the back of Gibson's neck stand on end, that familiar sensation of being watched, settling over him like a physical weight. He turns slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing moves except shadows cast by branches swaying in the gentle morning breeze. "Just get it done, Everett," he tells himself, voice unnaturally loud in the strange acoustics of the clearing. Gibson unstraps the survey drone from his backpack, sets it on the ground, and powers it up. The small quadcopter hums to life, rotors spinning as he checks the camera feed on his tablet. The image flickers with statics. Another common occurrence in 22G, but seems stable enough for basic aerial photography. The drone lifts off, climbing steadily above the canopy as Gibson guides it in a standard grid pattern. On his tablet screen, the forest unfolds in remarkable detail, until the drone passes over the northern section of his survey area. The video feed corrupts instantly, pixelating into unrecognizable blocks of color before cutting out entirely. Gibson curses, frantically working the controls to bring the drone back. The signal returns as the machine retreats from whatever invisible boundary it crossed. He's lost 2 drones in this sector already. The department budget can't absorb a third. Something catches his attention on the tablet screen, a circular pattern in the vegetation about a quarter-mile north. Unlike the natural chaos of the forest, this formation appears almost deliberately shaped, with trees thinning in concentric rings around a central point. Gibson zooms in as much as the camera allows, but details remain frustratingly unclear. He marks the coordinates on his map the old-fashioned way, using triangulation from visible landmarks. Whatever that circular clearing is, it warrants closer inspection. The hike to the circular formation takes longer than expected. Twice Gibson finds himself walking in circles despite maintaining what should be a straight line. The forest seems to resist his progress, dense undergrowth suddenly appearing where moments before had been clear passage. When he finally breaks through into the circular clearing, his watch shows nearly an hour has passed for what should have been a 15-minute walk. The clearing itself is even more unusual up close. A perfect circle approximately 50 yards in diameter where vegetation grows progressively sparser toward the center, as if respecting some invisible boundary. Gibson's satellite phone buzzes in his pocket, startling him. Reception in this area is typically non-existent, making the sudden call seem almost supernatural in timing. "Everett," he answers, voice tight. Dr. Jermaine Westbrook's familiar academic tone crackles through the speaker, oddly clear despite the remote location. The archaeologist explains that his team has detected anomalies in recent satellite imaging of Sector 22G and received emergency permission to investigate. They're en route now and should arrive within the hour. Could Gibson meet them at the northeastern access point? Gibson agrees, relief washing over him at the prospect of company in this unsettling place. Dr. Westbrook's team arrives precisely when promised. 4 graduate students laden with equipment, and the professor himself, a tall man with silver hair and penetrating gray eyes that seem to notice everything at once. Gibson has worked with him on 3 previous digs and respects his methodical approach and encyclopedic knowledge of indigenous cultures. "Mr. Everett," Westbrook greets him with a firm handshake. "Excellent timing. I believe we've located something significant in this sector, possibly related to Wintu petroglyphs, but with unusual stylistic elements that suggest cross-cultural influence." Gibson leads them to the circular clearing, describing the equipment malfunctions and strange acoustics. Dr. Westbrook nods as if this confirms something he already suspected. The indigenous peoples of this region often spoke of places where the world grows thin, he says, eyes scanning the clearing with methodical precision. Areas where natural laws bend slightly. Most archaeologists dismiss such accounts as mythology, but I've found that myths frequently contain kernels of observable truth. He points to the clearing's center. There, that's where we'll begin. The team works efficiently, setting up a grid system for excavation and documentation. Gibson assists where needed, helping to clear away centuries of accumulated forest debris from what gradually emerges as a massive boulder partially embedded in the earth. The stone stands nearly 7 feet tall, its surface weathered by time, yet still bearing unmistakable human markings. Petroglyphs cover its face. Concentric circles, spiraling pathways, stylized human figures with raised arms, and animals both recognizable and fantastical in form. "Extraordinary," Dr. Westbrook murmurs, carefully brushing lichen from a particularly intricate carving. "These symbols align with known Wintu iconography, but this central design..." His voice trails off as he traces his fingers just above the surface of a complex spiral pattern with 7 branching paths radiating outward like a cosmic wheel. Gibson notices how the archaeologist's hands tremble slightly, how he won't quite touch this particular symbol despite freely handling other carvings. When Westbrook sketches the design in his notebook, his normally precise line work appears hesitant, as if reluctant to capture the pattern exactly. "What does it mean?" Gibson asks, drawn inexplicably to the central spiral. Dr. Westbrook doesn't answer immediately, instead directing his team to photograph and document every inch of the boulder. When he finally responds, his casual tone feels rehearsed, too deliberately nonchalant, likely a cosmological map of some kind. Many indigenous cultures represented their understanding of the universe through similar spiral motifs. Nothing particularly unusual. but his eyes betray him, darting back to the symbol repeatedly as if it might change when not observed directly. As afternoon fades toward evening, the archaeological team completes their preliminary documentation. "We'll need to protect this site," Dr. Westbrook declares, packing away his equipment. "Mr. Everett, I'll need you to mark this area as restricted pending full archaeological survey. No timber operations, no recreational access." Gibson nods, already filling out the necessary forms on his tablet. The petroglyph boulder deserves protection regardless of any strange feelings it evokes. Something about the central spiral symbol pulls at his attention, like a half-remembered dream persistent at the edges of consciousness. Dusk approaches rapidly as the team prepares to depart. "We'll return tomorrow with proper equipment," Dr. Westbrook announces, shouldering his pack. He pauses, studying Gibson with an unreadable expression. "You should leave too, Mr. Everett. These old forests grow disorienting after dark." There's something in his tone, a warning wrapped in casual advice. Gibson nods, yet finds himself inventing reasons to linger. Equipment checks, additional photographs, GPS marking attempts that repeatedly fail. Dr. Westbrook hesitates before leading his team away, leaving Gibson with parting words that hover between scientific caution and something deeper. "Respect the site's boundaries, Mr. Everett. Some thresholds aren't meant to be crossed casually." Alone in the growing darkness, Gibson knows he should leave. The hike back to his vehicle will take at least an hour, and navigating these woods at night is foolhardy even with proper equipment. He packs his gear methodically, checks his flashlight batteries, verifies his compass, still malfunctioning, and yet doesn't move toward the trail. Instead, his attention repeatedly returns to the boulder, its weathered surface capturing the day's last light in a way that seems to make the carving stand in subtle relief. The shadows deepen around him, but Gibson remains transfixed. Something's changed about the central spiral petroglyph. What had been simply carved stone now emits a faint orange glow, barely perceptible at first, like dying embers glimpsed through ash. Gibson blinks, certain his eyes are playing tricks. The glow remains, steadily intensifying as true darkness descends upon the forest. He approaches slowly, drawn by an impulse he can't explain, and doesn't try to resist. The strange acoustics of the clearing amplify his heartbeat in his ears, each pulse synchronized somehow with subtle fluctuations in the petroglyph's illumination. The spiral now glows a fiery red, casting enough light to illuminate Gibson's outstretched hand as he reaches toward it. Some distant part of his mind screams warnings, but the voice seems to come from another world entirely, drowned by the silent call of the stone. His fingertips hover inches from the surface, feeling heat radiating from the carving. "What are you?" he whispers, the words swallowed by the unnatural silence. Then, unable to resist any longer, Gibson presses his palm firmly against the glowing spiral. The world explodes into light and sensation. Colors Gibson has never seen before, colors he has no names for, flood his vision in pulsing waves. He sees the boulder as it was thousands of years ago, watches as shamans in elaborate headdresses carve the symbols with patient precision, their tools glowing with the same otherworldly light that now flows through his body. He hears their chants in a language unknown yet somehow comprehensible, speaking of doors between worlds, of anchoring reality against cosmic tides that threaten to wash away the boundaries between what is and what might be. The vision shifts abruptly. Gibson gasps as landscapes flash before him, familiar forests consumed by unnatural fires that burn blue and white rather than orange and red. Cities crumbling as the ground beneath them ripples like water, skies torn open by swirling vortices that reveal glimpses of other worlds beyond. Through it all moves a shadow in the shape of a woman her features never quite visible yet conveying terrible beauty all the same. She turns toward him across the gulf of time, seeming to look directly into his eyes despite having none of her own. "Soon," whispers a voice like midnight silk. "Soon you will come to me, or I to you." What feels like seconds stretches into hours. Gibson snaps back to consciousness as morning light filters through the trees. He lies sprawled beside the boulder, body aching as if he's run for miles. The petroglyph no longer glows, appearing once again as ordinary carved stone, except the central spiral is gone, leaving a perfect circular depression in the rock face. Gibson lifts his throbbing right hand and stares in disbelief at what rests in his palm. A stone disk perfectly matching the missing petroglyph, warm to the touch and faintly pulsing with inner light that synchronizes with his heartbeat. Gibson staggered alongside Chief Redwood through the morning mist, his mind reeling as the stone pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, a second heart now, inseparable from his own. With each step, the spiral symbol on its surface seemed to shift subtly, lines rearranging themselves like a living equation solving for some cosmic unknown. The forest around them had transformed overnight, the familiar trees now sentinels watching his passage, the birdsong carrying warnings he could almost understand. As they crested the ridge overlooking Everpoint, Gibson noticed for the first time how the town seemed to sit at the center of natural formations that mirrored the same spiral pattern now etched into his palm, as though the land itself had been waiting for this moment. What did she mean? "Soon you will come to me," he asked, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. But the chief only looked at him with ancient eyes that held both pity and respect. "Time isn't what you think it is," he replied softly. "And neither are you." Chapter 2. The Weight of Time. The chief's words hung in the air between them as they descended into Everpoint. "Time isn't what you think it is. And neither are you." Gibson opened his mouth to demand an explanation when a wave of vertigo crashed over him. The spiral pattern on the stone pulsed violently, matching the sudden racing of his heart. The world tilted sideways, trees stretching impossibly long, the ground rushing up to meet him. Gibson awakens with a start, sunlight streaming across unfamiliar wooden walls. His head throbs with the pressure of 1,000 memories that don't quite feel like his own. As his vision clears, he realizes he's lying on a small cot in what appears to be a single-room cabin. The walls around him are adorned with artifacts that send shivers of recognition through his body, feathered dream catchers, stone tools, and most disturbingly, crude sketches that mirror fragments of the visions that had consumed him on the ridge. The petroglyph fragment sits on a small table beside him, pulsing with faint orange light. "You collapsed near the sacred stones," comes Chief Redwood's weathered voice from the corner of the room. He sits in a handcrafted chair, his dark eyes fixed on Gibson with the same mixture of pity and respect. "The stone has chosen you. I brought you here to my cabin rather than the clinic. What's happening to you now? Modern medicine has no answers for it." Gibson sits up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in his muscles. "What happened to me? Those visions I saw." He stops, unable to articulate the cascade of images that had flooded his consciousness. "I saw everything, the past, the future, things that haven't happened yet." Chief Redwood nods solemnly. "The time anchor has chosen you. 7 shamans created it after the Great Convergence, when the barrier between realities thinned." The old man rises with surprising grace and approaches Gibson. "That symbol," he points to the petroglyph fragment, "represents the convergence of 7 possible timelines. Everpoint sits at a nexus point where these realities touch." Gibson reaches for the stone fragment, intending to return it. I should put it back. I don't want this responsibility. But as his fingers touch the relic, a searing pain shoots up his arm, and the stone seems to melt into his palm. He cries out, watching in horror as the petroglyph sinks beneath his skin, leaving only a faint outline before it solidifies again as a physical object in his hand. "What's happening to me?" he gasps. "The relic has bonded with you," Redwood explains, seemingly unsurprised. "It will emerge when needed, retreat when dormant. You cannot separate yourself from it now. The connection has been made." The chief begins gathering herbs from a small shelf. "The visions will come easier with time, but they take a toll. You must be careful with this power." Later that afternoon, Gibson returns to his small house on the outskirts of Everpoint, the chief's warnings echoing in his mind. The relic has disappeared again, seemingly absorbed into his palm, leaving only the faint outline of the ancient symbol on his skin. He examines his hand under the harsh bathroom light, noticing how the mark pulses slightly when he concentrates on it. More disturbing are the objects around his home that seem subtly changed. A coffee mug in a different color, books arranged in an order he doesn't remember, a photograph frame that he could swear held a different picture yesterday. Alone in his living room, Gibson focuses on the mark on his palm, willing the relic to materialize. It emerges slowly from his skin, an impossible physics of stone passing through flesh, bringing with it the now familiar orange glow. Concentrating hard, he thinks of his parents. The car accident 6 years ago that had taken them both on a rainy night on Highway 299. The room around him blurs and shifts, reality peeling away like old wallpaper. He stands on the roadside, rain pelting his face, though he feels nothing physical. His father's blue sedan approaches around the bend, his mother laughing at something in the passenger seat. Gibson knows what comes next. The logging truck skidding across the center line, the unavoidable collision that orphaned him at 22. Without thinking, acting purely on instinct and desperation, he focuses his will and projects a single thought outward: danger ahead. Take the forest road instead. To his astonishment, his father's expression changes, and the sedan slows, turning onto a side road moments before the truck careens through the space they would have occupied. Gibson collapses to his knees in his living room, the relic clattering to the floor beside him. Excruciating pain radiates from his chest, and darkness claims him before he can process what he's done. Hours later, he awakens on the floor, his body feeling decades older than his 28 years. Dragging himself to the bathroom mirror, Gibson gasps at his reflection. Streaks of gray now run through his formerly solid brown hair, and fine lines have appeared around his eyes. But more terrifying is what happens when he blinks. For a split second, it's not his face in the mirror, but another's, familiar yet different, with harder eyes and a cruel twist to the mouth. "Hello, brother," the reflection seems to say before reverting to Gibson's shocked face. "Samuel," Gibson whispers, the name of his twin brother, stillborn while Gibson survived, feeling foreign on his tongue. He hasn't thought of his never-known twin in years. Yet now it seems as though Samuel stares back at him from reflective surfaces when he's not looking directly at them, gone when he turns to look. A trick of the light, he tells himself, yet the whispers at the edge of his consciousness suggest otherwise. The next morning, Gibson forces himself to the Everpoint Medical Clinic, alarmed by his continued exhaustion and the occasional double beat of his heart that feels like a stutter in time itself. Lila Morgan, the town's no-nonsense paramedic, takes one look at him and pulls him directly into an examination room. "You look like death warmed over, Gibson," she says, strapping a blood pressure cuff around his arm. Her eyebrows rise dramatically as she takes the reading. "Your heart rate is all over the place. And these patterns," she indicates the portable EKG she's attached to his chest, "I've never seen anything like it. What happened to you?" "I'm just tired," he lies, but even as he speaks, the medical equipment begins to malfunction, screens flickering and readings jumping erratically. The petroglyph mark on his palm burns, and he clenches his fist to hide it. "I haven't been sleeping well since the survey in Sector 22G. Lila narrows her eyes, unconvinced. "There's something you're not telling me. Your brainwave patterns are showing activity in regions that should be dormant." She leans closer, voice dropping. "Gibson, if you're experimenting with something out there in the forest—" "I'm not," he interrupts, pulling the sensors from his chest and standing abruptly. "I just need rest." He leaves before she can protest further, but her concerned gaze follows him into the street. The next 2 days bring escalating strangeness. The town itself seems subtly altered. The hardware store stands on the wrong corner. The diner's sign has changed color, and people greet Gibson with references to conversations he has no memory of having. In his home, objects from his childhood materialize in drawers and closets. A baseball glove he lost at 13. Report cards from schools he never attended. Photographs that show him standing with Samuel, identical twins, smiling at the camera. The most unsettling change, his parents' death certificate now shows a date 3 days in the future, not 6 years in the past. On the 3rd day after discovering the relic, the town erupts in panic when 7-year-old Tyler Jenkins disappears in the forest during a school nature hike. As search parties form, Gibson stands apart, the mark on his palm burning with urgency. Finding a moment alone, he summons the relic and concentrates on the missing boy. Visions flood his mind, the child following a deer trail, becoming disoriented, eventually huddling beneath a distinctive lightning-struck redwood near a small creek, 5 miles northeast of the search area. Gibson joins the volunteer team headed by Lila, subtly directing them toward the location from his vision. "I surveyed that sector last month," he explains when questioned about his certainty. "There's a creek bed that a kid might follow." 4 hours later, they find Tyler exactly where Gibson knew he would be, cold and frightened, but unharmed. The profound relief Gibson feels is matched by an unexpected sensation, warmth spreading from the relic through his body, the gray in his hair receding slightly, his fatigue lifting like morning fog. The following day, a black government SUV arrives in Everpoint, parking in front of the town hall. Dr. Amara Chen emerges, a slender woman with sharp eyes and sharper questions, her credentials identifying her as a specialist in geomagnetic anomalies from a department Gibson has never heard of. He observes from across the street as she greets Germain with a familiarity that surprises him. "We've detected unusual electromagnetic patterns emanating from this region," she announces at an impromptu town meeting, "particularly concentrated around what your Forestry Service designates as Sector 22G. Her eyes lock with Gibson's across the room. "I understand you've been conducting surveys in that area, Mr. Everett. I'd like to review your findings." Something in her gaze suggests she knows more than she's saying. Germain steps between them, his posture protective. "Gibson's reports go through me first," Germain says, his typically genial tone hardened. "Standard archaeological protocol." That evening, as Gibson walks along the outskirts of town, wrestling with whether to confide in Germain about the relic, he becomes aware of being watched. He turns to find a woman standing in the shadows of the trees, impossibly beautiful, with skin that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Gibson Everett," she says, her voice resonating on multiple frequencies simultaneously. "The new Time Walker." "Who are you?" he demands, the relic burning in his palm, emerging without his conscious summoning. She smiles, stepping forward. As she moves, her shadow doesn't follow her body, but precedes it, stretching and contracting in impossible ways. "I am Nona. I've existed in the spaces between moments since before your kind learned to make fire." She raises her hand, and the air around her shimmers. "You're going to ask if I mean you harm. You're going to step backward exactly 3 paces. You're going to feel afraid yet fascinated." And as she speaks, Gibson finds himself doing precisely these things, as if her words construct reality rather than describe it. "How are you doing that?" he whispers. "The same way you saved that child yesterday. The same way you changed your parents' fate." Her eyes reflect the orange glow of the relic. "You've barely scratched the surface of what's possible, Gibson. Reality is malleable for those who know how to touch it." She extends her hand toward him. "I can show you more. So much more. Or," her expression hardens slightly, "we can be enemies. The choice, Time Walker, is yours." The relic pulsed against Gibson's palm, its warmth spreading up his arm like liquid fire. Time seemed to stretch around him, each heartbeat an eternity as he stared into Nona's knowing eyes. Behind her, the window of Dr. Germain's office reflected not one but 3 versions of Gibson, himself as he stood now. Another graying at the temples with wisdom-lined eyes, and a third with a shadowed face he barely recognized. The choice before him felt impossibly heavy, as if entire futures balanced on the fulcrum of this single moment. As Gibson opened his mouth to answer, a distant crack echoed through the air, the sound of something ancient splitting open, or perhaps the first fracture in reality itself. Outside, flames the color of sunset began to trace impossible patterns across the darkening sky over Everpoint. Chapter 3. The Branches of Time. I'll hear you out. The words left Gibson's mouth before he could fully consider their implications. Nona's smile widened, revealing 2 perfect teeth as the strange patterns continued to dance across the evening sky outside. That was 3 days ago. Now Gibson's knuckles turn white as he grips the steering wheel, the Forest Service truck bouncing violently along the rutted fire road. The relic pulses in his pocket with an otherworldly warmth, its energy synchronizing with his racing heartbeat. The spreading petroglyph mark on his palm, identical to the one on the relic, now extends past his wrist, its orange glow visible even in daylight. After Nona had shown him glimpses of possibilities that defied everything he thought he knew about time, Gibson couldn't shake the feeling he'd made a bargain whose terms he didn't fully understand. As the University Research Center comes into view, Gibson sets his jaw with determination. Germain knows more than he's admitted, and today Gibson intends to get answers. The archaeology department sits quiet and empty this early in the morning, most students and faculty still hours from arrival. Gibson finds Dr. Germain hunched over an ancient text in his office, magnifying glass in hand, silver hair disheveled as if he too hopped. "You knew," Gibson says, voice trembling. "You knew exactly what was out there. That boulder wasn't a random archaeological find. You led me to it." Germain removes his glasses slowly, his expression transforming from scholarly distraction to solemn resignation. "I suspected," he admits. But I couldn't be certain until it chose you." He gestures to the mark spreading across Gibson's hand. "The fact that it bonded with you confirms everything." "Confirms what?" Gibson demands, leaning across the desk. "That I'm seeing impossible things? That a woman who calls herself Nona appeared in my cabin last night talking about collapsing realities? That I'm slowly dying every time I use this thing for the wrong reasons?" His voice cracks on the last question, the reality of his situation hitting him anew. Dr. Germain rises from his chair with unexpected agility for a man his age. He crosses to the door, locks it, then pulls down the window blinds. "There are things I've been forbidden to speak of directly," he says, voice lowered. "But now that you bear the mark, I can tell you everything." He moves to a seemingly ordinary bookshelf and presses a hidden mechanism. The shelf slides sideways, revealing a narrow doorway. "The Temporal Protection Society has existed for millennia, Gibson. I'm merely its latest sentinel in this region." Gibson follows Germain through the doorway and down a spiral staircase that shouldn't possibly fit within the building's architecture. The stairwell opens into a vast chamber beneath the university library, a room lined with ancient texts, artifacts under glass, and walls covered in variations of the same petroglyphs Gibson now carries on his skin. In the center sits a circular table with 7 indentations, one of which glows faintly as Gibson approaches. "There are 7 relics," Germain explains, gesturing to the table. 7 fragments from 7 boulders at 7 nexus points around the world. Each one allows its bearer to access and eventually manipulate the time stream in different ways. He pulls an ancient leather-bound journal from a nearby shelf. "According to our records, Nona has already collected 3 of them." Gibson studies the yellowed pages as Germain opens them, revealing detailed drawings of artifacts identical to his own, though with different petroglyph patterns. "What does she want with them?" he asks, though he fears he already knows the answer. "Power beyond comprehension," Germain says grimly. "Each relic she obtains amplifies her ability to collapse alternate timelines and absorb their energy." He turns several pages to reveal accounts written in different hands across centuries. 3 complete realities, billions of lives, and countless possibilities have already been erased from existence, their potential energy harvested by Nona. The door to the chamber opens and Gibson spins around, instinctively clutching the relic. Lila Morgan stands in the doorway, her Forest Service uniform disheveled, eyes wide with alarm. "Gibson," she breathes, "you need to come. It's Chief Redwood." "Things happened." The drive to the reservation takes half the time it should, Gibson pushing the truck beyond safety on the winding forest roads. Lila sits silently in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at the relic now clutched in her hand. "He asked for you specifically," she finally says. "Said he met a woman last night who asked about you and the Stone of Seeing. After she left, this aging began." Chief Marcus Redwood's cabin sits at the edge of the tribal land, overlooking the valley that contains Sector 22. G. Gibson has always known the chief as a robust man in his 60s, strong enough to lead hunting expeditions and tribal ceremonies. The man who lies in the bed before them now appears to be well over 90, his once thick black hair now thin and white, his muscular frame withered to almost nothing. "Gibson," Redwood wheezes, reaching out a trembling hand covered in liver spots. "She came for the knowledge, took it from my mind." His breath rattles painfully. "The woman of shadows asked about the stone's full potential. I tried to resist, but she... He winces at the memory. She pulled the knowledge from me. Years of life, gone in minutes. Gibson kneels beside the bed, clutching the dying man's hand. What knowledge, Chief? What did she want to know? Redwood's eyes find focus briefly. When all 7 stones come together, reality itself can be rewritten. Not just glimpsed or nudged, but completely unmade and reformed to the bearer's will. His grip tightens with surprising strength. The stones were never meant for this. They were safeguards, not weapons. By mid-afternoon, Gibson and Germain stand once again before the boulder in Sector 22G. The archaeologist has brought ancient texts recovered from the Society's archives, their pages covered in symbols matching those on the massive stone. According to these records, Germain explains, a council of shamans from 7 different traditions gathered here during what they called the Great Convergence, a cosmic alignment that happens once every 10,000 years. Gibson places his hand on the boulder, the relic in his other palm. I need to see them, he says, focusing his will. I need to understand why they created these. The vision comes faster than before, the relic responding to his growing mastery. Colors swirl and reality shifts as Gibson finds himself standing in the same clearing, though the landscape appears slightly different, younger, wilder. 7 figures in ceremonial garb surround the boulder, which now glows with blinding intensity. They chant in languages Gibson doesn't recognize, yet somehow understands. To preserve, not to change. To guard, not to control. To witness, not to judge. The shaman, wearing a headdress reminiscent of Wintu traditions, looks directly at Gibson across the millennia. The temptation to reshape will always exist, he says, somehow aware of Gibson's presence in this vision. But the branches of time must be allowed to grow naturally. We create these anchors not as tools of power, but as shields against those who would prune the tree of possibility for their own harvest. When Gibson returns to the present moment, Germain is shaking his shoulder urgently. Look, the older man says, pointing toward Everpoint. Dark smoke rises from multiple locations around the town, forming an unnatural pattern against the sky, the exact shape of the petroglyph on Gibson's relic. The fires spread with impossible speed as Gibson and Germain race back to town. By the time they reach the outskirts of Everpoint, 7 distinct blazes form a perfect circle around the community, each one burning in patterns that defy natural fire behavior. Townspeople rush about in panic, loading vehicles and spraying down rooftops, but the Forest Service's emergency response seems disorganized, ineffective. Gibson finds Lila directing evacuation efforts at the town hall. Something's wrong with the water, she explains breathlessly. It's falling upward in some places, freezing solid in others despite the heat, and time itself feels wrong. Some people report minutes passing like hours, while others say they've been stuck in the same moment repeatedly. She grabs Gibson's arm. This isn't a natural disaster. It's Nona, Gibson confirms, watching as the fires continue their unnatural spread, forming an ever more perfect representation of the petroglyph symbol across the landscape. She's using this chaos as cover for something bigger. The air before them shimmers and distorts, reality itself seeming to fold inward. Nona steps through the rupture, her beauty even more ethereal and terrible than before. Unlike their first meeting, she now makes no attempt to appear human. Her skin shimmers with cosmic energy, her hair floats as if underwater, and her eyes contain swirling galaxies of light. "I gave you time to consider my offer, Gibson Everett," she says, her voice echoing strangely as if coming from multiple directions simultaneously. "Now I require your answer. Join me willingly, and we shall reshape existence together. Resist, and I will take the relic from your corpse." Gibson feels the relic burning in his palm, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. When he touches it, time fractures around him, not into a single vision, but into dozens simultaneously. He sees himself ruling alongside Nona across multiple dimensions, powerful beyond imagination, but hollow inside, his humanity slowly fading with each reality they collapse. In another branch, he sees himself standing against her, using the relic not as a weapon, but as the shield it was meant to be. A choice that costs him everything but preserves the natural order. "You're wrong about the relics," Gibson says, stepping forward as the visions continue to bombard him. "They weren't created to give power over time. They were made to protect time from people like you." He raises the relic, which now glows with blinding intensity. "I won't help you destroy reality. I choose to guard it, whatever the cost." Nona's beautiful face contorts with rage. "Then you will die having accomplished nothing," she hisses, raising her hand as reality warps around her. The 3 relics she possesses, orbiting her form like satellites. Gibson doesn't use the relic to attack. Instead, he focuses on the one ability he's mastered completely, connecting consciousnesses across time. With every ounce of his will, he forges a link, not between himself and Nona, but between Nona and every person affected by her manipulations. Every collapsed timeline, every stolen life, every moment of suffering caused by her ambition suddenly floods into her awareness all at once. Nona screams, a sound that shatters windows throughout Everpoint and causes the very air to vibrate. Her perfect form flickers and destabilizes as genuine remorse crashes through her for the first time in her ageless existence. "What have I done?" she whispers, looking at her hands as if seeing them anew. Without another word, she steps backward into the rupture, which seals behind her. The fires begin to die instantly, the temporal anomalies settling back into normal patterns. Gibson collapses to his knees, physically transformed by his choice. Gray streaks now run through his once dark hair, and lines crease the corners of his eyes, not the rapid aging that affected Chief Redwood, but a permanent change nonetheless. The relic has bonded completely with him, the petroglyph pattern now extending up his entire arm and across his chest. Dr. Germain helps Gibson to his feet as townsfolk emerge cautiously from their shelters. "You chose well," the old archaeologist says softly. "The society has waited generations for a guardian like you." Gibson looks out at the town he's saved, the first branch of time he's protected rather than altered. "She'll be back," he says, with certainty born of his newfound connection to the time stream. "Not as an enemy, but seeking redemption. And when she returns, I'll be waiting." The end. I would love to hear your story ideas. Please leave a comment below with themes, characters, or settings you'd like to hear in future bedtime tales. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more peaceful tales. Sweet dreams, my dear friends.